The fluorescent lights hummed a monotonous tune, reflecting off the polished floors of the Crystal Peaks Mall. Christmas carols, piped through hidden speakers, warbled a cheerful counterpoint to the rhythmic thud of shoppers' feet. Families, laden with brightly colored bags, navigated the crowded walkways, their faces a mixture of holiday excitement and weary determination. The air, thick with the aroma of cinnamon pretzels and simmering coffee, vibrated with a palpable energy. Little Sarah clutched her mother's hand, her eyes wide with wonder as she gazed at the towering Christmas tree in the center court. Ornaments glittered like captured stars, reflecting the excited faces of the children gathered around its base. A long line snaked towards a brightly decorated booth. Santa Claus was in residence, and the opportunity for a treasured photo was not to be missed. Parents jostled for position, their phones poised to capture the perfect moment of holiday magic. Further down the corridor, a gaggle of teenagers huddled around the entrance to the arcade, their laughter echoing through the mall. The flashing lights and cacophony of digital noises spilling out from within promised an escape from the festive frenzy. A young couple strolled hand in hand, their eyes locked on each other, seemingly oblivious to the chaos around them. A lone businessman, his tie loosened, clutched a steaming cup of coffee, his brow furrowed in concentration as he scrolled through emails on his phone. Everything seemed perfectly normal, a snapshot of everyday life unfolding against the backdrop of the holiday season. An ordinary day at an ordinary mall. But beneath the surface of this idyllic scene, a storm was brewing, a confrontation that would shatter the illusion of peace and reveal the hidden depths of a man who preferred to remain unseen. A man who would soon be forced to step out of the shadows and confront a darkness that threatened to consume the innocence of youth. The festive atmosphere, however, was a thin veneer over a more unpleasant reality. Near the entrance of the arcade, away from the twinkling lights of the Christmas tree, a different kind of scene was unfolding. A hulking figure, easily a head taller than most of the surrounding teenagers, blocked the path of a smaller, more timid-looking boy. This was Marcus, and his booming voice cut through the arcade's noise like a jagged shard of glass. He was the quintessential bully, oversized, overconfident, and utterly lacking in empathy. His two equally unpleasant cronies, sporting matching sneers and oversized hoodies, flanked him like loyal hyenas. Well, Marcus sneered, his voice dripping with mock sweetness. Look what we have here. Little Timmy trying to sneak past us. He reached out a meaty hand and snagged Timmy's backpack, yanking him to a halt. Timmy, no older than 12, flinched, his eyes wide with fear. I don't have any money, Marcus, Timmy stammered, his voice barely audible above the din of the arcade games. I already told you. Marcus chuckled, a deep, guttural sound that sent a shiver down Timmy's spine. Oh, I'm sure you can find some, Timmy. Maybe in your pockets? Or perhaps in your lunch money. He tightened his grip on Timmy's backpack, the straps digging into the boy's shoulders. Please, Marcus, Timmy pleaded, his voice cracking. My mom needs that money for groceries. Groceries? Marcus roared with laughter. Who needs groceries when you can have power UPS? He punctuated his sentence with a shove, sending Timmy stumbling backward. Now cough it up, Timmy, or things are going to get unpleasant. His cronies echoed his laughter, their eyes glinting with anticipation. The idyllic mall scene, for Timmy, had become a terrifying gauntlet. Unbeknownst to Marcus and his cronies, their little drama was being observed. Across the corridor, near a window display showcasing the latest gaming consoles, stood a man who seemed utterly out of place amidst the festive chaos. It was Jason Statham. He wasn't posing for photos or signing autographs. He was simply there, dressed in a simple, dark gray peacoat and jeans. He blended into the background with an unnerving ease. He held the hand of a young girl, perhaps 8 years old, who was intently studying a plush unicorn in the window. This was Lily, his fictional daughter. Statham's face was an impassive mask. His eyes, however, were sharp and focused, taking in every detail of the unfolding scene across the corridor. He watched Marcus's bullying with a detached air, his expression betraying neither anger nor concern. He appeared almost bored, as if witnessing a minor inconvenience rather than a blatant act of intimidation. Lily tugged at his hand. "Daddy, can we get the unicorn? Please." Statham glanced down at her, a flicker of warmth softening his features. "Maybe later, sweetheart," he replied, his voice a low rumble that barely carried above the mall's noise. He didn't break eye contact with the scene unfolding near the arcade. He observed Marcus's posturing, the fear in Timmy's eyes, the smirks on the faces of Marcus's friends. He noted the subtle shifts in body language, the power dynamics at play. He saw it all, cataloging every detail with the precision of a seasoned professional. To the casual observer, he was just another shopper. But beneath the calm exterior, something was stirring. A quiet intensity was building, a silent promise of action waiting to be unleashed. For now, though, he remained an observer, a silent predator watching his prey. Despite the simmering intensity beneath his calm facade, Statham didn't immediately intervene. He stood there, a statue carved from granite, his grip tightening almost imperceptibly on Lily's hand. A flicker of something, perhaps reluctance, perhaps regret, crossed his face, gone so quickly it was almost imperceptible. He had spent years trying to leave that life behind, the life of constant conflict, the life where violence was the answer to every question. He had built a quiet existence for himself and Lily, a life far removed from the shadows and the bloodshed. Getting involved, drawing attention to himself, risked shattering that fragile peace. Perhaps he was remembering a past incident, a time when his intervention had unintended consequences, a situation that spiraled out of control despite his best intentions. Maybe the faces of those he had hurt, or those who had been hurt because of him, flashed before his eyes. The weight of those memories was a heavy burden, a constant reminder of the darkness he carried within him. He glanced down at Lily, her innocent face illuminated by the soft glow of the window display. She was his reason for staying away, his anchor in the storm. He couldn't risk exposing her to that world, the world he had fought so hard to protect her from. But the image of Timmy, cowering before Marcus, lingered in his mind. The fear in the boy's eyes mirrored a fear he had seen too many times before, a fear he knew all too well. And he knew, deep down, that he couldn't simply stand by and watch. The internal conflict raged within him, a battle between his past and his present, between his desire for peace and his ingrained sense of justice. The scales were tipping. The decision was made for him. Marcus, growing impatient and emboldened by Timmy's continued resistance, shoved the smaller boy with considerable force. Timmy, caught off guard, stumbled backward, his feet tangling, and he fell heavily to the ground, his backpack scattering its contents across the floor. A half-eaten sandwich, a crumpled homework assignment, and a small, worn teddy bear lay pathetically exposed. The sound of Timmy's fall seemed to echo in the sudden silence that descended around them. Even the arcade, noises seemed to momentarily diminish. Lily gasped, her eyes widening with alarm, and she squeezed Statham's hand tightly. That was the line. The unspoken boundary that Marcus had crossed. The tipping point. Statham's face hardened. The internal conflict vanished, replaced by a cold, unwavering resolve. The past, the present, the future, all faded into insignificance. There was only the now, and the now demanded action. He released Lily's hand, his movements fluid and deliberate. "Stay here, sweetheart," he said, his voice low and firm, brooking no argument. Lily, sensing the shift in his demeanor, nodded silently, her eyes fixed on him with a mixture of fear and trust. Statham moved. He didn't run, didn't shout, didn't draw attention to himself. He simply walked, his pace measured and purposeful, his gaze locked on Marcus. He moved with a quiet confidence, a silent authority that radiated from him like heat from a furnace. The transformation was complete. The reluctant observer was gone, replaced by something else entirely. Something dangerous. The sleeping giant had awakened. The game had changed. Statham stopped a few feet from Marcus, his presence radiating an almost palpable aura of control. He didn't raise his voice, didn't clench his fists, didn't adopt a threatening posture. Instead, he spoke calmly, his voice a low, even tone that cut through the lingering tension. "Marcus, isn't it?" he said, his eyes locking onto the bullies. "I believe the young man asked you to leave him alone." Marcus, momentarily taken aback by Statham's unexpected appearance and unnerving composure, straightened up, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. His cronies, however, remained defiant, their eyes darting nervously between Statham and their leader. "Mind your own business, old man," Marcus sneered, attempting to regain his bravado. "This doesn't concern you." "On the contrary," Statham replied, his voice still calm, but with an underlying edge of steel. "I believe it does. You see, I have a daughter of my own, and I wouldn't want anyone treating her the way you're treating this young man." He gestured towards Timmy, who was slowly gathering his scattered belongings, his face still etched with fear. "He owes me money," Marcus retorted, his voice rising in volume. "He needs to learn to pay his debts." "Debts?" Statham raised an eyebrow, his expression conveying a mixture of amusement and disbelief. "I highly doubt a 12-year-old owes you anything of value. Besides," he continued, his voice softening slightly, "is this really the example you want to set for yourself? Bullying someone smaller and weaker than you? Is it the kind of person you want to be?" He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "There are better ways to resolve disagreements, Marcus. Ways that don't involve intimidation and violence. Why don't you help him pick up his things, apologize, and we can all go our separate ways?" He offered a small, almost imperceptible smile, an invitation to de-escalate the situation peacefully. Statham's attempt at reason, however, was lost on Marcus. Fueled by the presence of his cronies and a deep-seated need to maintain his tough guy image, Marcus scoffed, his arrogance bubbling to the surface. The flicker of uncertainty he had briefly displayed vanished, replaced by a renewed sense of bravado. "Oh, I'm sorry, did I hurt your feelings, old-timer?" Marcus sneered, emphasizing the last two words with exaggerated sarcasm. His cronies snickered in response. "Maybe you should go back to the retirement home and take a nap. Leave the real world to the real men." He stepped closer to Statham, puffing out his chest in a pathetic attempt to intimidate him. "What's an old guy like you going to do anyway? Break a hip? You probably can't even remember what it's like to throw a punch." He winked at his friends, who were now openly laughing. "Yep, Pops," one of the cronies chimed in, "why don't you go knit a sweater or something? This is way above your pay grade." Marcus continued his tirade, his voice growing louder with each passing second. "Maybe I should start charging extra just for the disrespect. You think you can just waltz in here and tell me what to do? I run this place. Grandpa. You and your daughter. He spat the word out like a curse, glancing in Lily's direction. "Better learn some respect." He punctuated his words with a dismissive shove, attempting to push past Statham. "Now get out of my way before I make you." The air crackled with tension. Statham's calm facade remained unbroken, but a subtle shift occurred in his eyes. The amusement was gone, replaced by a look that could freeze lava. The game was about to change again. As Marcus shoved him, Statham didn't flinch. He didn't raise his hands in defense. He simply flowed, like water around a rock, redirecting Marcus's momentum with an almost imperceptible movement. It was a masterclass in economy of motion, a demonstration of practice skill. Instead of resisting, Statham stepped inside Marcus's reach, using the bully's own force against him. With a swift, almost invisible maneuver, he secured Marcus's wrist, applying precise pressure to a specific point. It wasn't a bone-crushing grip, not a display of brute strength. It was something far more subtle, far more effective. Marcus gasped, his face contorting in surprise and pain. He tried to pull away, but Statham's grip remained unyielding, the pressure intensifying with each futile attempt to break free. It wasn't the kind of pain that left bruises, but it was excruciating nonetheless, a sharp, burning sensation that shot up Marcus's arm and left him momentarily paralyzed. He stumbled backward, his bravado evaporating like mist in the morning sun. His eyes widened in disbelief as he realized he was completely at Statham's mercy. The laughter of his cronies died in their throats. Statham maintained a wrist lock, holding Marcus in a position of complete control. He could have easily broken the bully's arm, could have inflicted serious damage with minimal effort. But he didn't. He simply held him, a silent demonstration of power and control. "That," Statham said, his voice still calm, but now carrying an unmistakable warning, "was a mistake." He released the pressure slightly, allowing Marcus to breathe, to think. "I'm not going to hurt you," he continued, "but I'm going to make you understand that you can't go around bullying people. There are consequences for your actions." The subtle display of controlled force spoke volumes, a clear message that violence wasn't necessary, but the potential for it was always there. The stunned silence didn't last long. Marcus's cronies, witnessing their leader's humiliation and sensing a shift in power dynamics, snapped out of their stupor. Loyalty, or perhaps the fear of being next, spurred them into action. They surged forward, their bravado returning, their eyes narrowed with animosity. "Hey, let him go, old man," one of them shouted, his voice cracking with a mixture of fear and aggression. "You don't want any trouble." The other crony, a lanky kid with a perpetually sneering expression, stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. "Yeah, back off before we make you." They positioned themselves on either side of Statham, effectively flanking him and cutting off his escape route. Their movements were clumsy and uncoordinated, but their numbers gave them a perceived advantage. The air crackled with anticipation, the threat of violence hanging heavy in the air. Statham remained unfazed. He didn't release Marcus, didn't even glance at the approaching cronies. His focus remained solely on the bully, his eyes conveying a silent warning. He was assessing the situation, calculating the odds, preparing for the inevitable. The surrounding shoppers, sensing the escalating tension, began to back away, creating a wider circle around the confrontation. Murmurs of concern rippled through the crowd, their festive mood replaced by a palpable sense of unease. The Christmas carols, still playing softly in the background, seemed grotesquely out of place. The three figures stood locked in a tense standoff, a tableau of defiance and impending violence. The bully, humbled and humiliated, trapped in Statham's grasp. The cronies, emboldened by their numbers, ready to defend their leader. And Statham, the calm eye of the storm, ready to unleash his fury if necessary. The mall, once a haven of holiday cheer, had become a battleground. Without turning his head, without breaking eye contact with Marcus, Statham spoke, his voice barely above a whisper, yet somehow carrying with an unnerving clarity. The words were directed at the cronies, a chilling warning delivered with an almost casual indifference. "You need to understand something," he said, his grip on Marcus's wrist tightening almost imperceptibly. "What you're about to do is a very bad idea. Not for me," he emphasized, "but for you." He paused, allowing his words to sink in, the silence amplifying the unspoken threat. "I'm not going to explain to you the things I'm capable of. I'm not going to boast or threaten. I'm simply going to tell you the potential consequences. If you choose to intervene," he continued, his voice devoid of emotion, "there will be pain. There will be injuries. And there's a very real possibility that you will spend the next few years regretting your decision. Not because of what I do to you," he added, "but because of what you will force me to do." He glanced briefly at Lily, his expression softening for a fraction of a second before returning to its cold, impassive state. "I'm trying to avoid a situation that will be unpleasant for everyone involved, especially my daughter. But I will not hesitate to defend myself, or her, if necessary." He looked back at the cronies, his eyes conveying a message that was far more potent than any explicit threat. He wasn't boasting, wasn't bluffing. He was simply stating a fact, a cold, hard reality. He was showcasing his lethal capabilities without uttering a single word about violence. The unspoken promise hung heavy in the air, a chilling testament to the man beneath the calm exterior. The decision, he made clear, was theirs. The cronies, momentarily stunned by Statham's chilling words, hesitated. The bravado that had fueled their advance faltered, replaced by a flicker of genuine fear. They glanced at each other nervously, unsure of how to proceed. Just then, a new element was introduced into the already volatile mix. The shrill blast of a whistle pierced the air, followed by the hurried footsteps of approaching figures. Mall security had arrived. Two uniformed officers, a man and a woman, pushed their way through the crowd, their faces grim and determined. They had clearly been alerted to the commotion and were prepared to intervene. The woman, clipboard in hand, barked orders at the onlookers, instructing them to disperse. The man, his hand resting on his holstered weapon, scanned the scene with a practiced eye. All right, what's going on here?" the male officer demanded, his voice loud and authoritative. "Break it up. Everybody move along." The arrival of security added another layer of complexity to the situation. Statham, already facing a potential confrontation with the cronies, now had to contend with the added pressure of law enforcement intervention. He knew that any further escalation could lead to unwanted attention, potentially jeopardizing his anonymity and exposing Lily to unnecessary stress. He released his grip on Marcus's wrist, allowing the bully to stumble backward, rubbing his injured limb. The cronies, sensing an opportunity, quickly moved to shield their leader, their eyes darting nervously between Statham and the approaching officers. The situation was far from resolved. The tension remained palpable, the threat of violence still simmering beneath the surface. But the arrival of security had changed the dynamics, forcing everyone involved to recalibrate their strategies. The game once again had shifted. The male officer, a burly man with a stern expression, immediately zeroed in on Statham. "All right, sir," he said, his voice accusatory. "What's your involvement in this? We received reports of a disturbance." Before Statham could respond, Marcus, seizing the opportunity to regain control of the narrative, stepped forward, putting on an innocent act. "Officer, this guy just attacked me," he exclaimed, feigning injury and distress. "He grabbed my arm for no reason. I was just standing here with my friends, and he came out of nowhere and started harassing me." The cronies nodded in agreement, backing up Marcus's fabricated story. "Yeah, that's exactly what happened," one of them chimed in. "He's crazy. He needs to be arrested." The female officer, clipboard in hand, looked skeptical, but the male officer seemed inclined to believe Marcus's version of events. Perhaps Marcus's family held some sway in the community. Maybe they were known for their generosity or influence. Or perhaps the officer was simply predisposed to distrusting outsiders. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step aside," the officer said to Statham, his tone becoming more forceful. "I need to get your statement." He reached for his handcuffs, a clear indication that he was prepared to escalate the situation. Timmy, still shaken from the earlier encounter, watched the scene unfold with growing anxiety. He wanted to speak up, to defend Statham, but he was intimidated by Marcus and his friends, afraid of the repercussions he might face. It seemed as though Statham was about to be wrongly accused, the victim of a carefully constructed lie. The scales of justice were tilting in the wrong direction. The situation was spiraling out of control, threatening to undermine everything Statham had tried to achieve. The need for intervention was greater than ever. Statham took a deep breath, maintaining his composure despite the escalating absurdity of the situation. He knew that any display of anger or frustration would only confirm the officer's suspicions. He needed to remain calm, rational, and persuasive. "Officer," he said, his voice even and measured, "I assure you, I am not the aggressor here. I intervened because this young man," he gestured towards Marcus, "was bullying that younger boy." He pointed towards Timmy, who was still standing nearby, looking lost and afraid. He continued, "I witnessed him demanding money from the boy, shoving him, and generally intimidating him. I simply stepped in to de-escalate the situation and prevent any further harm." He paused, allowing the officer to process his words. "If you take a moment to speak with the younger boy, I'm confident he will corroborate my account. Furthermore," Statham added, "I only used minimal force to restrain this young man after he became physically aggressive. I assure you, I acted entirely in self-defense and in the defense of another." He carefully avoided mentioning the wrist lock, focusing instead on his attempts to de-escalate the situation peacefully. He presented himself as a concerned citizen, a rational actor who had intervened to protect a vulnerable child. He made eye contact with the female officer, hoping to appeal to her sense of fairness. "Officer, I understand you have a job to do, but I urge you to consider all the facts before making a judgment. This young man," he gestured again towards Marcus, "is not being truthful. I am simply trying to do the right thing." He knew that his words were his only weapon, his only hope of avoiding a potentially disastrous misunderstanding. He had to convince them that he was the rational party, the one telling the truth. Just as the male officer seemed poised to dismiss Statham's explanation, a voice rang out from the crowd, cutting through the tension like a knife. "He's telling the truth." All eyes turned towards the source of the voice, a woman, her face flushed with anger, pushing her way through the throng of onlookers. She was slightly out of breath, her shopping bags jostling against her legs as she moved. It was Mrs. Davis, Timmy's mother. "I saw everything," she declared, her voice trembling with indignation. "That young man," she pointed a finger at Marcus, "was bullying my son. He was demanding money, threatening him, and then he shoved him to the ground." She rushed to Timmy's side, enveloping him in a comforting hug. "Are you all right, honey?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. Timmy nodded, burying his face in her shoulder. Mrs. Davis turned back to the security officers, her gaze unwavering. "This man," she said, gesturing towards Statham, "was the only one who had the courage to step in and help. He stopped that bully from hurting my son even more. He's a hero, not a criminal." The male officer's expression shifted, his initial skepticism replaced by a flicker of embarrassment. He glanced at the female officer, who raised an eyebrow, a silent, "I told you so," passing between them. The tide had turned. Marcus's carefully constructed lie had crumbled, exposed by the unwavering testimony of a credible witness. Statham's account had been vindicated, his innocence established. The scales of justice had finally righted themselves. The atmosphere in the mall shifted once again. The murmurs of concern turned to murmurs of approval, the onlookers nodding in agreement with Mrs. Davis's assessment. The bully's reign of terror had come to an end. The color drained from Marcus's face. The confident swagger he had displayed moments before vanished, replaced by a look of utter mortification. His fabricated story had been exposed, his carefully constructed image shattered. He glanced at his cronies, hoping for some sign of support, but they averted their gaze, their loyalty evaporating in the face of public condemnation. The power dynamic had shifted, and they were no longer willing to associate themselves with a loser. The weight of the crowd's judgment, the scorn in their eyes, pressed down on Marcus, crushing him. He had been exposed as a liar, a bully, a fraud. The humiliation was overwhelming. His voice, once booming and assertive, was now barely a whisper. I didn't," he stammered, unable to formulate a coherent explanation. Tears welled up in his eyes, blurring his vision. He had tried to project an image of strength and dominance, but beneath the surface he was just a scared, insecure kid. The facade had crumbled, revealing the vulnerability he had tried so hard to conceal. He hung his head, his shoulders slumping in defeat. The laughter of his cronies, the fear in Timmy's eyes, the respect he had craved, all gone, replaced by shame and ridicule. The male security officer, his expression now a mixture of embarrassment and disapproval, stepped forward. "All right, young man," he said, his voice stern. "I'm going to need you and your friends to come with us." Marcus didn't resist. He simply nodded, allowing himself to be led away by the officer, his head still bowed in shame. His cronies followed behind, their bravado completely extinguished. The bully had been broken, his reign of terror brought to an ignominious end. The crowd watched them go, a collective sigh of relief sweeping through them all. As Marcus was being led away, his head bowed in shame, Statham did something unexpected. He stepped forward, his face softening with a surprising expression of compassion. He addressed Marcus directly, his voice low and sincere. intended only for the bully's ears. "Marcus," he said, his tone devoid of judgment, "this doesn't have to define you." Marcus glanced up, his eyes red and swollen, a flicker of surprise in his gaze. He hadn't expected Statham to speak to him, let alone offer words of encouragement. "You made a mistake," Statham continued, "a big one. But everyone makes mistakes. The important thing is to learn from them." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "You have a choice now, Marcus. You can let this experience break you, or you can use it to become a better person. You can choose to continue down the same path, or you can choose to change." He placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, a gesture of empathy and understanding. "There's a lot of good in you, Marcus. I saw it in your eyes, even when you were trying to act tough. Don't let the fear and insecurity control you. Don't let them turn you into someone you're not." He removed his hand, allowing Marcus to process his words. "Think about what happened here today. Think about the pain you caused, not just to Timmy, but to yourself. And then make a decision. Decide what kind of person you want to be." He offered a small, almost imperceptible smile. "It's not too late to change, Marcus. It's never too late." He stepped back, allowing the security officers to lead Marcus away. His moment of compassion had passed, leaving behind a seed of hope in the heart of a broken bully. With Marcus and his friends in the custody of mall security, the immediate crisis had passed. Mrs. Davis knelt beside Timmy, brushing the dirt off his clothes and checking him for injuries. She held him close, whispering words of comfort and reassurance. Timmy, his initial fear subsiding, clung to his mother, finding solace in her embrace. The crowd, their curiosity satisfied, began to disperse, their voices buzzing with excitement and speculation. They rehashed the events, offering their own interpretations and opinions. Some praised Statham's bravery, others condemned Marcus's behavior, and still others simply marveled at the unexpected drama that had unfolded in their midst. The female security officer approached Statham, her expression apologetic. "Sir," she said, "I want to apologize for the misunderstanding. We appreciate your intervention and your willingness to assist us. We'll take it from here." Statham nodded, accepting her apology with a curt smile. He had no desire to linger, to bask in the attention of the crowd. He simply wanted to leave, to return to his quiet life with Lily. The male officer, still visibly embarrassed, avoided eye contact with Statham as he escorted Marcus and his friends towards the security office. The incident had clearly shaken him, forcing him to confront his own biases and prejudices. The Christmas carols, which had been drowned out by the commotion, now seemed to fill the mall once more, their cheerful melodies a stark contrast to the drama that had just unfolded. The holiday atmosphere, though slightly tarnished, began to return. The world, it seemed, was returning to normal. But for Marcus, for Timmy, and perhaps even for Statham, things would never be quite the same. The events of that day would leave an indelible mark, a reminder of the power of choices, the importance of compassion, and the hidden depths that lie beneath the surface of everyday life. Statham rejoined Lily, who had been watching the aftermath with a mixture of fear and fascination. She clung to his hand, her small fingers gripping his tightly. "Daddy," she asked, her voice barely audible above the mall's din, "what happened? Why were those boys fighting?" Statham knelt down, bringing himself to her level. He looked into her eyes, searching for any sign of distress. "There wasn't a fight, sweetheart," he said gently. "There was a bully, someone who was trying to hurt another little boy, and I had to stop him." "But why?" Lily asked, her brow furrowed with confusion. Why would someone want to hurt someone else? Statham sighed, knowing that he couldn't shield her from the harsh realities of the world forever. "Sometimes people are scared and insecure," he explained, "and they try to make themselves feel better by hurting others. It's wrong, and it's important to stand up to bullies." "But you grabbed his arm really hard," Lily said, her voice laced with concern. "Did you hurt him?" Statham took a deep breath. "I try to handle it peacefully, Lily," he said. "But sometimes you have to use force to protect yourself and others. But you have to use it responsibly, only when it's absolutely necessary. And you have to use only the amount of force that's needed to stop the threat." He continued, It's important to stand up for what's right, Lily, to protect those who can't protect themselves. But it's also important to remember that violence is never the answer unless there's no other choice. He hugged her tightly. "Do you understand, sweetheart?" he asked. Lily nodded slowly, her eyes still filled with questions. "I think so, Daddy," she said. "But I don't like it when you have to be scary." Statham smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Neither do I, Lily," he said. "Neither do I." He stood up, taking her hand once more. "Now, how about we get that unicorn?" He wanted to change the subject, to steer her away from the darkness and back towards the light. He wanted to preserve her innocence for as long as he possibly could. As they walked towards the toy store, Lily skipping ahead, Statham's thoughts drifted back to Marcus. He hadn't told Lily the whole truth, not everything. There was a piece of the puzzle he had left out, a piece that added a layer of complexity to the entire situation. He hadn't simply intervened because he saw a bully harassing a smaller child. He had intervened because he recognized the bully. He knew who Marcus was. He stopped, watching Lily admiring the unicorn through the window. He knew this was something he had to tell her, something she needed to understand, even if she was too young to fully grasp the implications. He knelt down beside her, his voice barely a whisper. "Lily," he said, "there's something else you need to know about that boy, about Marcus." Lily looked up at him, her eyes wide with curiosity. "What is it, Daddy?" Statham took a deep breath. "I recognized him, Lily," he said. "I knew who he was. He's the son of someone from my past. Someone I had a conflict with a long time ago." He paused, searching for the right words. His father was a bad man, Lily. He did some terrible things. And I wasn't always a good person back then either. He saw the confusion in Lily's eyes, the struggle to comprehend the weight of his words. He knew he couldn't reveal too much, couldn't burden her with the details of his past. "It's complicated, Lily," he said. "But the point is, I knew who Marcus was. And that's why I had to do something. Not just because he was bullying another kid, but because I wanted to make sure he didn't turn out like his father." The twist was revealed, changing the context of everything that had come before. He looked at Lily, her innocent face a stark contrast to the darkness he had just alluded to. He knew he couldn't tell her everything, not yet. But he could give her a glimpse into the complex web of motivations that had driven him that day. "You see, Lily," he said, his voice low and thoughtful, "sometimes the best way to fight the past is to change the future. I couldn't undo what happened with his father. I can't erase the mistakes I made. But maybe, just maybe, I can help his son make different choices." He paused, his gaze drifting towards the mall's exit, as if searching for something beyond the glass doors. "It wasn't just about stopping a bully, Lily. It was about planting a seed of doubt, a seed of hope, a seed of change. I wanted to subtly influence him, to make him question the path he was on, to prevent him from repeating the mistakes of his father." He smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "It's a long shot, I know. There's no guarantee it will work. But sometimes all you can do is try. All you can do is hope that you've made a difference, however small." He stood up, taking Lily's hand once more. "It's like a karmic loop, Lily," he said, "trying to break a cycle of violence and pain. Trying to make amends for the past by shaping the future." He squeezed her hand tightly. "That's why I did what I did, Lily. That's why it was so important." The ending left the audience pondering the long-term implications of Statham's actions, the complex web of cause and effect, the burden of the past, and the enduring power of hope. It revealed a hidden depth to Statham, a man haunted by his past, driven by a desire for redemption, and willing to use his skills, not for violence, but for something far more meaningful, the chance to change a life.